Perfect.
I think I would prefer to stand up, actually, at the podium, but everybody can do what they want.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. We know that we are the session standing between you and a happy hour, so we have decided to make this really exciting. So we'll be all presenting at different times during the session, talking about regulatory challenges, integrations within systems, and tying that all together with communicating and educating the public on waste to energy and waste conversion. So to kick us off, we're going to do a quick round of introductions. John, why don't you get us started?
Sure. I'm John Angin from Tetra Tech Solid Waste Division, and I'll be speaking about due diligence in projects along these lines.
Great. Kawsar?
Hi everyone, my name is Kawsar Vazifdar, a civil engineer at Los Angeles County Public Works. We work on solid waste management, including collection, alternative to landfills, disposal, and regional solid waste management programs.
Like I mentioned, my name is Nick Kohr. I'm the Director of Engineering for the Lancaster County Solid Waste Management Authority in Pennsylvania. We're a smallish regional authority. We manage about 1 million tons a year between 2 counties in south central Pennsylvania through our integrated system, which includes 2 mass burn incineration facilities. And I'm mainly here to learn and take in all the new technologies, so it's been great so far.
And as I mentioned earlier, I'm James Swart, Director of Special Projects with the Solid Waste Association of North America, SWANA, out of Silver Spring, Maryland. And we're really excited to bring together public and private sector for this discussion today. For those who are unfamiliar, SWANA is the professional association for folks in waste and resource management. Founded here in Southern California about 60, 70 years ago. Representing over 10,000 professionals in the waste and resource management industry across the world. So about 85% of our membership is located here in the United States, 10% in Canada, and the remaining 5% in 27 other countries around the world. California alone represents another 10% of our membership. So excited to be here in San Diego with you all. And want to kind of kick off our conversation by talking a little bit more about SWANA, and then I will let the experts take over and just kind of facilitate our conversation today. So SWANA views ourselves as the leading association for waste and resource management professionals. So when we got started, we were heavily focused on landfill, and since then we have evolved to cover waste conversion, material recovery, landfill management, planning, and operations, kind of the full spectrum of everything within the waste and resource management industry. So at the end of the day, SWANA's goal is to advance waste management to resource management. This is a great opportunity to talk about that mission here at this event with waste conversion. And we know that all of our members provide an essential service to their community. I was on the phone with a member back in February when it snowed in Dallas, Texas, and she said that her phone had been ringing off the hook because everyone's trash didn't get picked up that day. So we are the industry that is not noticed until it goes a little awry. So we know that that's an essential service, and we appreciate the service that the members provide to their communities. We like to also view one of our purposes as a service to the industry through education, training, and different forms of content, research from our Applied Research Foundation. And fourth and final is through our certification programs. So SWANA currently has 7 certifications that range from zero waste to landfill management, collection and transfer. So again, kind of bringing home that message that we're the professional home for the entirety of the industry. SWANA has 4 core pillars that kind of guide all of our work. First and foremost, that's present in everything that we do is prioritizing safety. So the waste and resource management industry is on the U.S. Department of Labor's top 10 most dangerous jobs list. This past year, we dropped from 7th on the list down to 4th, so the 4th most dangerous job within the United States. And with that, safety is core to everything that we do. Starting every meeting with a safety moment, all the way through incorporating safety into comments on proposed policy and regulation. We like to champion progress on sustainability. So going back to that resource management piece, what can we do that is sustainable and kind of promoting the industry forward. Promoting professional development opportunities through our certifications and training, and delivering exceptional value to our members. So SWANA is a proactive association instead of a reactive association. We've got 10,000 members worldwide, so that helps us keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in the industry. I'll run through this one pretty quickly. We are the voice of the industry and who we represent. That comes through in comments on regulation, both on the state and federal level. Education, training, and credentials are a core part of what we offer. Access to expertise and technical knowledge through our research and our member communities. So we've got 7 technical divisions, which are our subject matter expert groups, that allow people to continually share ideas, challenges, and find solutions. And at the end of the day, the nature of an association is to bring people together. So we do that through both in-person, virtual networking, and partnering with key stakeholders, whether that's other professional associations, like-minded organizations that align with our values, and companies within the industry. We are also holding this thing in November called Archon. So those who may be familiar with SWANA know that in the past we've offered 2 events throughout the year. Both of those have been sunset, and Archon is now the place where waste and resource management professionals will come to think. So we're excited to bring the industry together in Columbus, Ohio, November 12th through the 15th. Archon will include content that is technically focused, leadership skills, several experiential learning tours throughout the Columbus area, and what our CEO, Amy Listischenberg, likes to refer to as surprise and delights. So things that you won't expect, but will make you say, oh, Archon is that place that I need to go to year after year. We're hoping that event provides a place where you walk away with one idea that you can go and apply immediately. So we're excited to bring the industry together in Columbus. There's an ad in the event program if you'd like to learn more about Archon, and of course, always happy to talk more about SWANA. But with that, I'd like to turn over to our subject matter experts. And we're gonna start our conversation today by looking at the regulatory landscape, specifically California and Pennsylvania. Very different, both geographically, but each presents their own unique challenges within the regulatory environment. So Kawsar, I'm gonna start with you. Can you talk a little bit about how these regulations shape your approach to conversion, barriers that remain, and then Nick, we're gonna follow up for the Pennsylvania perspective as well.
Yes, thank you. So in California, the main regulatory driver right now for conversion technologies is state law, Senate Bill 1383, requires a 75% reduction in statewide disposal of organic waste. So this graphic is from the state's website run by CalRecycle. And the overarching purpose of SB 1383 is to reduce emissions of methane, which are generated when organic waste is disposed in landfills. And so conversion technologies can be used to do just that, to divert that organic waste out of landfills. The most common is anaerobic digestion that can be used to process food waste and green waste. But under SB 1383, we also have to divert wood waste, paper, cardboard, textiles, and all these other organic materials that aren't actually suitable for anaerobic digestion. And so that's where the regulatory barriers come into play, because currently the state of California considers non-combustion thermal CTs like gasification and pyrolysis that we talked about today as disposal. So on the one hand, they're saying divert your organic waste from landfills, but on the other hand, but not using conversion technologies other than AD. There's one exception, it's for biomass conversion, but that is limited to processing only source-separated and uncontaminated and unrecyclable paper waste, green waste, and wood waste. But CalRecycle did open a little door. There's an option in SB 1383 if you can demonstrate that your technology, even if it's thermal, can reduce methane emissions more than composting, you might be able to get a certification to divert your organic waste with that technology. Did we want to move on to the next slide? Yeah. Oh, okay, great. In Los Angeles County, by the year 2034, we project that we're going to be disposing about 3.4 million tons of organic waste. And of that, 830,000 tons will be food waste. Like I said, that's most suitable for anaerobic digestion. It can be used to produce all these beneficial materials like fertilizers, pipeline gas, vehicle fuel, electricity, even hydrogen. And then other technologies can be used for other types of organic waste. In addition to wanting to develop anaerobic digestion facilities, we also want to continue advocating for the development of thermal CTs to process those waste streams like paper, cardboard, textiles, wood, et cetera.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So I guess it's a little bit different perspective. Obviously, in Pennsylvania, the regulations are much, much different than California, definitely a more conservative area. And wanted to give kind of a little bit different perspective. So I'm sure all of us have come into situations where the biggest challenge I would say we currently face in Pennsylvania is kind of the uncertainty in regulations and the constant change in regulations. It's just nothing is steady state. It's always changing, and a lot of times the people making the changes don't necessarily understand the impacts of the changes they're making. What I have here is, this is kind of a recent example, or what I'll say is a recent example of some of those implications. The EPA developed a good neighbor rule when it came to ozone gas releases in the Northeast, and as part of that, it was Pennsylvania's requirement to enact those new changes. So in Pennsylvania's case, that was what was referred to as RAC 3, which was the third iteration of the reasonable available control technologies, and that was specifically related to NOx emissions, and in our case specifically to our mass burn waste energy facility. So there's a lot of information on this timeline. It's not all super important, but basically what it was, we were interacting with the regulators. They came out with a proposed rulemaking in 2001 that set a general standard for what those proposed rule would look like, and then what the limits would be as part of that. And specifically for the NOx emissions at our facility was 150 ppm were those proposed limits. There was little discussion after that. The industry was under the assumption that the proposed rule and the final rule would look very similar. But we were kind of thrown a curveball in 2022 when they actually enacted the rule, and instead of the proposed limit being 150, it was 110 parts per million, which was a major change for the industry, specifically in the mass burn incineration world. A lot of facilities had a lot of or would have a difficult time meeting that. So not only did they put out a change in the proposed rule, but they also enacted a effective date of that rule 5 months after the proposed rule was created. So we were effectively out of compliance before we even made a submission to how we were going to get into compliance with the rulemaking. So Long story short, we made a plan submittal in December of 2022 showing how we would make those changes. Our plan was approved in 2023 in July, and we actually ended up getting all of those changes done on our units by September, which was kind of a monumental feat. It was an unbudgeted expenditure. It was an additional $8 million in capital that had to be put into our units. And it was a major technical change to the units, all of which we had to get completed essentially within a year. And it's just a major, major challenge that I think the industry faces and I'm sure all of us could come up with different scenarios along these same lines where I don't think there was any malicious intent in the way they came out with the rulemaking. It's just that's the way the rulemaking came out, and we were required to kind of roll with the punches, I guess you'd say, on trying to figure out a solution. So from our perspective, I think kind of the uncertainty in the industry regulations and then basically ensuring that regulators have an understanding of what the implications are of the regulations that they're proposing.
So whoever's holding on to that magical crystal ball that will let us know where state and federal regulations are going to land, now would be a great time to pull it out. Thank you both for that perspective. It is very clear that the regulatory environment is constantly changing and evolving. If you get those push notifications to your phone, you never know what might be popping up. But no doubt, several coming changes for our industry to adapt, and something that we're definitely prepared for. So I want to pivot the conversation now from regulatory to thinking and talking about integrated waste conversion and waste management systems. So the Solid Waste Association has our Applied Research Foundation. So this is a body that does desk research on topics that have been identified by key stakeholders within the industry. A couple weeks ago, a report came out from the Waste to Energy research group that looked at the cost benefit of refurbishing or replacing waste to energy facilities. So that report analyzed key decision points for waste to energy facilities located within the United States on, does it make more sense to extend the life or to build a completely new facility? A lot of these cases came from Florida, and through this research we found that the average U.S. waste to energy facility is 36 years old. Waste to energy facilities have an average life of 20 to 30 years, so definitely getting to that point where you've got to make that call, and not to spoil the final chapter, but similar to what Dr. Cole said earlier, new is not sexy. What we found through the research is that refurbishment is usually the more financially viable option, but there are cases where replacement is warranted. So this research report, along with any other of our waste to energy, waste conversion, our reports are available on the SWANA website. So that's swana.org. You can search for Applied Research Foundation and download any of those reports that we put out. John, I'm now going to turn it to you, because a lot of this deals with doing your due diligence and looking at all of the factors, and I think you've got a great outline and process for us that kind of discusses that plan of attack.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the interesting things about coming back to a conference like this, the last time I attended this conference and participated in it was in 2012, and a lot has changed, but a lot has stayed the same. Interestingly, the due diligence process that we go through now, as an organization that works on a lot of solid waste management plans, there are a lot of the same questions, but we don't spend nearly as much time on the the technical process engineering work that we used to before. We used to see a lot of examples of technologies where we had to actually deliver the bad news that it's just not going to work. And now we're seeing much more mature technologies, which is a good thing. We love to see that evolution. But we still look at, from a technology perspective, we still look at the operational history of the technology at the scale that it's being proposed. That's still another area where we see some shifts. People have a better understanding of it now. But, the reality is we still see mismatched projects where you've got a system that just can't handle a facility of that size or that scale, or the scale is too small and is not accounting for future growth and things like that. And then the other factor when it comes to the technology is the history of similar feedstock. So I've been in the waste industry for a long time, and the feedstock is never homogeneous. And I think we all know that now. If you go back, 10 or 15 years, people actually believed that it was pristine and it all looked the same and you were going to get these amazing results, but that's really a myth. You can go, I've been an operator for a long time in the waste industry, and the waste can look different certainly looks different from site to site. It can look different at the same site from hour to hour sometimes. So you're really dealing with an unknown, and you've got to have a technology that's robust enough to handle that, and you've got to have proper pre-processing as well. The second category is environmental and social. Obviously, we look at air and gas emissions, water, chemicals, and other effluents, how you handle that material, the byproducts, what you do with those. Do you have hazardous waste? Do your byproducts require a T-clip test every time? What's that going to cost you? What's it going to cost to dispose of hazardous materials? That's got to be worked into the economics of a project, and it's something that, again, unfortunately, is overlooked a lot of the time. Economics is a big issue, more and more so as we have better information. The solid waste management system fee structure has to support the incremental system costs. And that actually goes both ways, too. You're adding cost to the system by using a technology, for instance, but you may have avoided disposal costs if you're using a third-party landfill. If you own the landfill, you're actually able to, in many cases, decelerate the amortization of the airspace and actually preserve airspace and be able to use it for a longer period of time. That has to be figured into the economics as well. Calculating the net amount of the value of the energy, we still see a lot of these kinds of questions that come up, and that is people using nameplate capacity, the gross amount of energy they're going to produce without thinking about the parasitic load, that there actually is a subtraction, so it's really about the net amount of energy. That can change the dynamics with respect to the economic analysis overnight. All of a sudden, a project that was going to work is not going to work anymore. So another very important step. Projecting the normalized O&M costs. And I think one of the great things about seeing the evolution of the conversion technology industry for solid waste is that we have a lot more data than we used to have. We've had projects that have been running long enough. We know what the O&M costs are. We can look at those, and we can use those to project what the O&M costs are going to be in the future. And this was an area that didn't get a lot of attention in years past, and in many cases, the O&M costs were projected to be grossly under what they actually were. And then another factor would be analyzing the fully burdened cost of the feedstock. So here I'm talking about the acquisition and preparation cost. So you have a technology that requires the feedstock to look this way and to meet these specs in order for it to work at an optimal level. But you are probably not going to get the feedstock looking that way. So what does it cost you? What are the acquisition costs, the logistics cost to get it to you? How far afield do you have to go? What's that going to cost? And then if you have to do any pre-processing, if you have to do any pelletizing, whatever the case may be, that's a cost that needs to be included when you talk about the economics. And sliding right over to feedstock, understanding the optimal feedstock mix and its availability. I heard someone talk about future competition for that feedstock. That's another important factor. And it goes even further than that, which is just because the feedstock is out there does not mean you're going to get it. I just got off a long-term international project, and I can't tell you how many times people told me, well, there's 25,000 tons per day. This is a real number, 25,000 tons per day of plastic being produced in Indonesia. So it can support 50 pyrolysis projects. Well, no, it doesn't work that way. Your chances of actually aggregating 5 tons per day are remote at best because there are no collection systems in place. So that market is not matured enough to be able to handle it. Does the feedstock exist? Yes. Are you going to get it? It's going to take a long time to build up that sort of capacity and that kind of infrastructure. As part of our solid waste management planning process and a lot of the work we do for cities and counties and private sector organizations, we do waste characterization. It's a core competency of what we do. So not only looking at the constituents of the material stream by type, but also what does that waste characterization or what does that waste stream actually look like? And a good example would be moisture content. Things change pretty dramatically when you need to be at 15% moisture content, but your feedstock is at 70. And so what's it going to cost to get it to the level that you need? That adds to the overall cost of the economics. The regulatory framework is another area that's been talked about a little bit already. How does a project fit into the current regulatory framework? What does the permit say you can do? If you're going for a new permit, try to make it as flexible as you can because you never know what you can do in the future. So you want to be able to diversify potentially in the future. So it's all about long-term planning, which again is a big part of what we do with solid waste management planning in general. The degree to which the current public policy is consistent with the project. Will there be policy changes that are required? And Nick has already talked a little bit about system integration, but I think it's important to mention here, determining whether the scale of the project matches the system needs to assess the impact of the project on the rest of the solid waste management system. How does it fit? And that's part of, again, what we do with a lot of our solid waste management planning when it comes to conversion technologies is looking how it fits into an existing system. So if you change this, what else is going to change and how do you get back to equilibrium from a cost perspective, from a workflow perspective, and a variety of other areas like that. There is some scalability. There certainly are more synergies that could be created from an operating perspective, and that's something that is important to look at as well to really be able to optimize some of these opportunities. So I'll stop there.
Great. Thanks, John. Nick, I think, at least from the facilities that I've heard described that the SWANA team has visited, the facility up in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania is a great example of kind of a well thought out and integrated system. So I think you've got a couple of slides coming up about kind of what that looks like. And Kawsar, I know you've got some perspective to share as well.
Yes. Thanks, James. Yeah, I think we do have an integrated system, as we call it, and kind of our philosophy for how we manage that waste comes down to kind of EPA's waste hierarchy. So we really break down our facilities into kind of the individual layers that make up this waste hierarchy, including recycling and HHW, volume reduction and energy recovery, and then we still feel landfill is kind of a key component of any integrated system because there's just needs to be that outlet at the end of the day. So our general philosophy is trying to figure out an integrated system that kind of touches on each one of these different layers together. So just talking about kind of what we're doing in Lancaster County, we have a county-wide recycling program that we kind of help manage, but it's the responsibility of the individual municipalities within that county to manage those individual programs. In Lancaster County, our recycling rates was 49% in 2023. I think last year we did actually hit 50% for the first time. So we have a pretty high recycling average compared to the national average. Again, looking at that layer in the waste hierarchy, we also have a pretty robust HHW collection program. We actually have a permanent HHW facility located at our transfer station, which is free to Lancaster County residents. 5.5 days a week when our transfer station is open, Lancaster residents can go there, dispose of TVs, electronics, pool chemicals, any other household hazardous waste essentially for free. So it's a big component of that recycling program is actually the HHW and what we're able to recycle or at the very least dispose of properly as part of that program. And then I touched on it a few times. A big component of our integrated system is kind of that third layer in the energy recovery is our Lancaster Waste Energy Facility. It's a mass burn waste energy facility located in the very western portion of the county. Was built in the early 90s, late 80s, processes about 1,200 tons a day. And really, at the back end of that facility, we're also able to collect metals as well as create an ash residue that we're able to use as ADC down at our landfill as well. So this is really a key component of our system, and I would say one of the primary pillars that holds up our whole solid waste system as a whole. Talking about, integrated solid waste systems, I guess there's a couple different ways to look at it. One is how do your integrated system specifically manage waste? I would also argue that it also has to integrate with the community as well. Lancaster is a highly agricultural area. We actually, I believe, have the highest amount of ag preserved land in the nation by county, I guess, if you look at it. So there was a definite need in Lancaster County for farmers being able to have an outlet for soybeans that were produced in the county. Up until this point, most soybeans that were produced in Lancaster County were actually trucked out of state to ports and things in Maryland. So we actually worked with Purdue Agribusiness to co-locate a soybean processing facility immediately adjacent to our waste energy facility, which provided an outlet for the local farmers and their soybeans, and it also provided the added benefit of us being able to directly sell steam to that facility as well as process water and effectively act as their utility in that, and it helped us diversify our integrated system even further to support the economics of waste energy, but also support the community. And then I just wanted to touch on, this is kind of related to waste energy as well, but we have our Fry Farm landfill, which is, again, our primary landfill. Was opened in 1989, receives mostly C&D or inert ash materials or ash residue from our waste energy facilities. I think the key point I wanted to touch on here is the facility was scheduled to be full around 2004 timeframe had we not implemented mass burn incineration or waste energy technology. So right now we're currently in our last phase of build out of that facility. And right now our projections are like 2035, 2036. So we are able to get about 30 additional years of capacity out of that facility by implementing waste energy within our integrated system.
Thanks, Nick. So before we look at a few other slides, just a couple questions for you all, kind of thinking back on what we've discussed so far. If you could pin it down to one or two, not that, you can reserve the right to change your one or two in 5 minutes. What are the most critical factors that should be considered when you're looking at your full kind of solid waste picture within your jurisdiction to decide, do we go integrated? Do we go like all in on waste energy? Like, what are those like one or two factors that you could pin down as like super critical?
You want? I would say there's a couple different factors. One, I think in our case, there's a very specific framework that's involved in every location that you're looking to implement this. Obviously, the regulatory framework is different in California from us. So looking at a lot of the things John mentioned as well, what sites are available, what materials are you looking to change. Honestly, one of the primary reasons I'm here is to learn about new technologies that might be able to complement our integrated system. So I don't know if there's a specific thing that is 100% non-negotiable. I think for us it's about trying to fit all the different pieces together, and that can look very, very different just by changing out one of the pieces, I guess you'd say.
I would default to economics every time, and I think that all of the different categories that I talked about earlier are all in some way tied back to the economics. Whether you're talking about feedstock, the regulatory system that you have that you're working with, the permitting process. It's all about the dollars. At the end of the day, does it fit the system? Can the system actually support, from a financial perspective, what it is that you're trying to do? And where can you find the synergies to sort of offset some of those new costs that you're bringing in? So it's this sort of financial equilibrium that you're trying to create. And of course, it's actually being able to explain that to people so that they can develop a comfort zone or some sort of a comfort level with it. But I would say definitely at the end of the day, especially with elected officials, it's going to be about the economics.
I think finances is also really important. In California, that comes into play in a couple of different factors. So in LA County, we contract our waste collection services to private haulers. So if a conversion technology facility is considered the same as disposal, they're not getting any diversion credit, they're not considered to divert organic waste from landfills, even though they are. Waste haulers aren't really going to be motivated to take the waste there because they're not providing the required service to the jurisdictions. And if that kind of leads me to the second aspect of finances, which is feedstock. So if a facility can't demonstrate that they're going to receive these guaranteed feedstock streams, that's really their anticipated revenue. And if they can't show that, it's very difficult to secure financing.
Kawsar, LA County did a really interesting study kind of looking at greenhouse gas emissions to see if that conversion technology can be integrated. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. So Los Angeles County conducted a comparative greenhouse gas emissions analysis. It demonstrates the importance and benefits of integrating CTs into the existing solid waste management infrastructure, as we've been talking about today. So we first looked at this baseline scenario. So in this scenario, the waste goes to an existing MRF, and there's 1,000 tons per day of residuals, and you take those residuals to a landfill, and the landfill gas is recovered to make energy. So this is a pretty typical scenario for many jurisdictions. But then we compared it to this alternative scenario where we have this integrated approach to waste management. So we take the same 1,000 tons per day of MRF residuals, but then we further process them in this integrated facility. So we recover additional recyclables. We compost or could anaerobically digest the organic fraction. And then for any materials that can't be recycled, can't be composted or digested, only that material then goes into a thermal CT to create energy. And so once we've processed the waste through this portfolio of different technologies, all you have left at the end is inert material. It's about 13% of the residuals, and it has no energy value left. And that's what you send to a landfill as kind of the last resort, so to speak. And so in this analysis, we looked at how many greenhouse gases would come out of both scenarios, the baseline versus the alternative. So the baseline, it generates 1.6 million tons of greenhouse gases over 125 years. So it's 25 years of waste processing and then an additional 100 years to account for additional decomposition of organic fraction in a landfill. But the alternative scenario is interesting. It actually reduces net greenhouse gas emissions by 600,000 tons. And that's because we're avoiding landfill emissions and we're creating renewable energy from the waste that's going to replace fossil-based energy sources. So this graph kind of just shows the comparison. The baseline is in red, which accounts for the avoided emissions from that landfill gas to energy operation. The yellow is the same baseline, but just doesn't account for the landfill gas to energy. You know, some landfills don't have that. And then the alternative scenario is in green. It reduces emissions, and also, as you can see, in the integrated scenario, the emissions just stop after 25 years of waste processing, because if you're only disposing inert material in a landfill, it's not going to continue generating greenhouse gases for another century.
It's a really, really fascinating study, and having been in LA at the convention center for the past few days, the county is very proud of how they are approaching waste management as a whole. I think I heard it 4 or 5 times talking with different people that work at the convention center on their different streams that they have just at that location. So nice to see that data that kind of goes along with it and supports that integrated approach. So one question before we wrap up kind of this section, and it's going to be another one of those, there's no perfect answer. What does successful integration look like? I mean, Nick, we've heard from you that you've been able to extend the life of a landfill 30 plus years. The LA County example, kind of reducing those net greenhouse gas emissions. So what does success look like when you've got one of these integrated systems?
Sure, I can start. So in addition to doing things like reducing greenhouse gas emissions from waste management, because California has such ambitious regulatory drivers like SB 1383, I think the main benefit for us would also be to provide a solution for this extremely complex law that we need to comply with, that's requiring us to address these very diverse types of organic waste that make up the organic waste stream, and providing different technologies that can address each one adequately and recover energy from it, divert it from landfills, and prevent that greenhouse gas generation.
Yeah, I'm going to have a similar, I think, response that I had to the earlier question. I think it's very specific to the area and the location you're looking at. So specifically in Lancaster County, success was whatever preserves the most amount of farmland in Lancaster County. That was, what's doing the right thing and preserving farmland is, in Lancaster County, a very, very high priority. So that was, I think for us, it's how do we preserve land and do the right thing when it comes to waste management, but obviously that, I think, could look a lot different wherever you're at.
Anything to add on, John?
I think that's a good answer. It depends. It depends on what your objectives are before you start. I think you might have a different perspective from a government standpoint than if you were maybe in the private sector, if you were a waste company, as an example. So you're looking at different things, but it's really all about trying to preserve this sort of equilibrium that I talked about before. It's making sure that you're covering your costs, making sure that you're able to provide the service, the best possible service that you can for the ratepayers. There's a way to do that. There's always a way to get there, and sometimes you've got to be kind of creative as how you do that. But again, it depends. I think really on what your objectives are in the first place.
Being creative in our industry, novel concept. Great. So we're going to shift to our final topic, and we've saved lots of time at the end for questions. Public perception and the public communication and education piece. So I'm fairly new to the industry. I started at SWANA about 11 months ago. And like the people who were calling into my member that I was talking to in February when the snow was coming down in Texas, it's not anything that I ever thought about. Come to find out, there's a waste-to-energy facility a mile from where I live. Drove by it every day, never thought twice about what it was, but there have been several instances, particularly in Fairfax County where I live in Virginia, where people do know that's a waste-to-energy facility, and they see the condensate coming out of the stack, and they're like, oh, well, that's just pollution. Well, no, that's powering your home. That's the conversion of kind of what you've been putting out in your trash to turn on the lights at the end of the day. And I'm sure it's no different in LA County, in Lancaster County, here in San Diego. Anywhere that you go, there's going to be that need for public education and the public perception of waste conversion. So I'd love to kind of hear some case studies on what's worked in your jurisdictions, kind of what you've learned from those, and maybe even a sneak peek of what might be planned coming up in Pennsylvania. So yeah, Nick, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think what we found works the best, obviously, it's especially when we talk about mass burn incineration, which even maybe in the room isn't viewed as the best option in all cases. I think a big conversation that needs to be had, and similar to what you were just mentioning, is making sure people understand truly what the benefits of the technology is, what the limitations are, how it can be improved. One thing we found very helpful for us is actually having people come out to the facility, see the facility, understand the facility. So we're actually starting or looking at rolling out a new waste energy campaign, specifically hosting public tours, tours focused on the public, tours focused on regulators, and tours focused on kind of public officials, and trying to make sure people understand what we're doing, the benefits of what we're doing, and we have the ability to kind of alleviate some of the concerns that they may have just from misinformation that they've heard. But really for us, that's been kind of a key function of what we've seen. Another one that's been very helpful, we've rolled out virtual tours of our facility, so not everybody can come see a facility. So you can actually go on our website and now take a virtual tour of each one of our facilities. And obviously, as is the new thing, is all the social media. So we do a lot of outreach and public, I don't want to say public education, but public information on that as well. Maybe one kind of lesser point to touch on is we also try and be as transparent as possible to try and build trust. So even things like our emissions from our waste energy facilities are actually published online. So you can actually see our emissions data, not quite real time, it's a few days old, but you can actually go on there and see how we're performing compared to our permit. So things like that are where we've found the most kind of bang for our buck when it comes to public education, is that direct information to the public and the entities involved, and then trying to be as transparent as we possibly can.
Did I go? I can just talk about it. So we have a website. It's called SoCalConversion.com. We have a lot of information on our efforts to support the development of conversion technologies. You can go to our website. You can sign up to receive our monthly e-newsletter. Currently, we have over 20,000 subscribers. We share news articles about conversion technologies, as well as upcoming events and conferences like this one. So I think one of our main messages in our public communications is we emphasize that conversion technologies, first and foremost, it's not the same as incineration or combustion, which burns the waste. It's, you know, using high pressure, high temperatures to kind of convert that waste into gas. And we also highlight the environmental benefits, including sustainable long-term solid waste management capacity, reduction in landfill emissions, and the creation of beneficial products like negative carbon energy, because in a jurisdiction as densely populated and urban as Los Angeles County, we have a lot of competing priorities. You know, public perception is that people do get concerned if they hear about a project related to waste or producing energy, because that sounds industrial and people have concerns. But I found that what's really effective is when we talk about the environmental benefits, that it does reduce greenhouse gas emissions and that it's a source of renewable energy. I think people start to think like, oh, I didn't realize you could make energy out of trash, and that actually sounds like a pretty good idea. So we're trying to change that perception.
I'm going to reserve the right to ask the last question because I think it will flow perfectly into networking later this evening. What questions do you all have? Certainly, you know, lots of great information shared today. Really appreciate John, Nick, and Kawsar sharing their perspective from where they sit. But I'm sure that you all have questions as well. So, and Gene's got the mic in the back.
Yeah, the beer.
And the beer, too.
All right, and you're going to hand me a microphone and not the beer. All right, so I have a question as to kind of how you handle the adversities with what we're doing here. You know, a lot of times, you know, in advanced recycling, you know, we get scrutinized that that's not recycling because you're giving an end of life to something. How much pushback do you guys see in each one of your entities of that type of struggle with the public that, well, you know, you're burning this or you're converting it to something that can only be used one more time, it's not really recycling? Do you see that a lot, or is that something that's starting to kind of calm a little bit, because it has been kind of an issue in the advanced recycling world?
Certainly that is something where we see a lot of concern as well as confusion about what these technologies actually are. In addition to hearing these concerns from the public, we also actually in California experience hearing some of these concerns from the state legislature or state regulatory bodies like CalRecycle. So I think some of these technologies like pyrolysis and gasification and transformation and incineration, they aren't even well defined within state law, so that sometimes makes them very difficult to develop and permit. So I think that's another thing that we need to address in California as well.
Good.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to my last question, or my last response, which was, I think a lot of it comes down to the public education and having them be involved and understand in what you're trying to do. And I think kind of walking them through not only what we do, but our larger view of what we're trying to do and how we manage waste has also been helpful for us. As you know, we're trying to utilize the system we have to the best of its ability, and we know it has limitations, but we're also actively looking at all of these new technologies and other opportunities and other solutions. So yeah, I think it's kind of a combination of a lot of different things that we try and implement.
When I first got into the waste industry, my mentor told me, if you hear nothing, you're succeeding. And that was back in the day where we were picking up garbage and we were taking it to an open dump in many cases. Yeah, that's how long that was ago. But things have changed, and I think the evolution of the waste industry, as we've begun to see more segmentation of waste streams, we need technologies to process them. The dynamics are changing dramatically, and I think that that really has raised the bar in terms of the public's a lack of understanding, I guess, is part of this. It's an education process, but it's a continuous education process. And I think the transparency is essential, but it's also important to understand why there's a pain point or why there's a misunderstanding. So going out and actually doing focus groups and things like that, trying to figure out why people have a perception that they have, where did that come from? I think that's going to help a lot in terms of in terms of trying to implement a community engagement plan to tell them about what you're doing, why you're doing it, what the impact is going to be.
So I'm right in the middle of this. So we did a bunch of local conferences, and we were in the newspaper, major newspaper, 4 different times. And it wasn't until the anti-incinerator people put a flyer out to every home that showed big burning, smoking incinerator. There's a plastic incinerator coming to your neighborhood. That's when everybody started paying attention. So how do you get in front of that? How do you actually reach out? And people don't pay attention to everyday news. How do you reach them ahead of time?
I'll start on that. Yeah, it's a tough question, and we were talking about this earlier. And there's a long history here, especially with pyrolysis. I don't know that there is an answer, but again, you have to be able to tell your story, and you have to start telling that story before you even start a project. You really need to get out in front of it. What are these misconceptions that come about, and the black smoke and the industrial revolution stuff, right? I mean, that's really what they talk about. The best thing to do is really to try to get out in front of that before that comes out, to be able to say, this is what we do, this is why we're doing it. Here's the plastic crisis in your case. Here's the plastic crisis on a global basis that we're trying to, that we play into, that we're trying to help alleviate. Here are the benefits of what we're doing. Yes, it's different, but what is the alternative? Would you rather see the microplastics in the fish that you eat, or there's so much data out there now. So I don't know that there's a real answer to this, but the farther out ahead you can get on it, that's something that needs to start right when the project is being scoped. How do you engage the community, and how do you tell your story? What makes you different?
Yes, in Los Angeles County, outreach and education is certainly a priority, especially our jurisdiction is so large and we have a lot of competing priorities, so waste isn't always at the top of the headlines. So one thing we do at Public Works is we like to have community meetings that are focused on the specific communities that may be impacted by a certain existing facility or upcoming project, to ensure that the stakeholders that would really be impacted or most interested get a chance to talk to us face to face, and that we can present the information and give them ample opportunity to ask questions. Because if we were just to post something online or send out mailers in a jurisdiction with 10 million residents, that probably wouldn't be sufficient. So we like to do that personal outreach, and like to proactively engage the community and make sure we're building that public trust and conducting our business in a very transparent way.
Yeah, I think I would echo what both of them said. Maybe the only other piece I could add to it, in Lancaster we have something that we call our Citizens Advisory Committee. So they're separate from our board of directors and things that govern the authority. It's really a group of citizens that are, I would say, generally well connected in the community, sometimes involves like local officials, but they're actually involved in the process. They meet regularly. I think it's 4 times a year. We give them updates on the authority, updates on projects, and I would say really they help us get out in front of some of these things because they're aware of what's going on. They're kind of connected in the community. So I do agree with John. You get out in front of it as far as you can, and that's one way that we do it. But the reality is you never know if it's that one social media post or that one flyer, like you mentioned, that can kind of derail things. But in Lancaster, that's one thing that we implemented years ago and seems to help smooth over some of those things, at least initially.
Yeah, so my question, I've been coming to this conference for a number of years now, and you know, unfortunately I see one of the challenges that continues from back then till today is really the regulatory and legislative environment surrounding this, which is one of the things I do at Baker Commodities, and you know, go to Sacramento and DC and fight it out with them all the time about this stuff. But you know, targeting LA County here, but I'd love to hear from all of you, you know, what your take is on this. How do we advance, you know, the regulatory and legislative environment to support some of these technologies? We are behind, you know, compared to Europe. We're behind compared to Canada, you know, and even in some cases behind compared to Mexico. How do we advance this going forward, you know, and specifically at LA County, you know, what are you guys doing to bring this message, you know, especially given that SB 1383 has passed and they've kind of laid their claim, you know, that composting is okay and nothing else is, even though composting is not a very green way of handling a lot of things. How do we move this forward and make some real change in the environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's a couple of different approaches. So one is within the existing framework of SB 1383, there's an option to take your technology, even if it's not composting or AD, and do a case study demonstrating that the life cycle emissions are comparable or less than composting. There's an established numerical baseline within the regulations. So I think supporting those types of projects to demonstrate the emissions reductions to CalRecycle can help open the door for maybe specific individual technologies and projects. But then on a broader scope, I think what's really needed is some changes to state legislation to clarify these definitions and clarify what is allowable and what's considered landfill diversion and organic waste disposal reduction, and what may still remain the same as disposal, such as incineration. So I think in LA County, that would look like working with our chief executive office and maybe pursuing some legislative proposals.
Yeah, maybe speaking a little broader than specific to LA County, I think involvement, and I think it speaks that you guys are here, but involvement in organizations like SWANA, for us it's Waste Energy Association for when we're talking about incineration, but I think the more involved you can get with those organizations and the more those organizations can be involved in the discussions with our legislators, I think that's really a key factor, because the reality is individually any one of us probably aren't big enough to move the needle, but working together with these industry groups I think is critical.
I would agree with, I'd say basically what you just said. It's the industry groups that are really going to be able to drive the process. They're representing the industry as opposed to individual requests and meetings and that sort of thing. So I think that's the best method.
Okay, so real quick back to the outreach to the community. As I think the only person who's truly lay here, who has no area of this, I don't ever see reach outing to like Nextdoor or influencers. I feel like for me, for the tax side of it, most of my clients get their tax information from influencers, and I usually tell them like, hey, you get an Instagram, you get you see something, you think it applies to you, before you do anything, call me, let me know, and then I will help and interact with you on that. And if you reach out to, like, I don't know, like Mila Rossi, or like something like a big influencer who's into, like, I don't know, community stuff, and natural living or stuff like that, that I think would reach a lot more people. I don't know if that helps, or reaching out. I know LA County, you guys also interact with schools, and I think that was really helpful. Having the kids learn sustainability and having programs like that, especially after school programs, I saw that was super effective with my nieces, and I feel like informing their parents is also a good way too, but like most of the time people work full time, they can't go to that community outreach, and maybe doing virtual outreaches or a social media page that's very accessible in, you know, Spanish and English or Mandarin and English can be very effective. I don't know if you already do that, and I just don't know it.
Yeah, thank you so much for that feedback. In LA County, we recently released a survey trying to get people's thoughts on how the county communicates with its constituents, and there were a lot of different options provided, and you had the ability to express concerns such as you can't make it to community meetings because they're at inconvenient times, and you know, whether people prefer in-person meetings, virtual meetings, social media, and it sounds like we probably will need to incorporate the full spectrum and make our outreach more robust going forward. I certainly agree with what you've said about schools. When I visit elementary schools and they're separating their food waste and their liquids and their packaging, they do it perfectly, and yet I sometimes see, you know, my own colleagues not always understanding how to separate their food waste properly. So I think starting with our youth that are definitely really excited, and they're in an environment where they're there to learn, so they're absorbing messages rather than us busy adults where we're not really reading signage and paying attention to what's going on around us, I think can certainly be really effective. And it would be great to also see increased engagement on social media. In LA County, you know, we have Nextdoor and X and Instagram and probably some other platforms that I don't even know about, but I think sometimes trying to maybe make things a little bit more fun, you know, can also help in posting like viral trends to just catch people's attention. So I think we kind of need anything and everything to get the message out there.
Well, actually, I'd like to follow through with the question that gentleman had over there. One of the things that we're doing at Los Angeles County, especially when it comes to household hazardous waste, is the extended producer responsibility. We're trying to pass an ordinance to make sure the producers who make the products that we all use and we all consume take the responsibility for their collection and for proper end-of-life use, reuse, and finally, hopefully, conversion technology into more beneficial uses. That's a big push for us. We are trying to pass that ordinance. I'd like to get the panel's opinion about the role that these producers play, and how successful do you think it's going to be to work with them, nudge them along, and see if they can go ahead and come up, you know, with products that can easily be converted, especially at the end of their life.
I guess I could start. So, you know, I definitely think that is a very important factor. Like with SB 1383, you know, there's a lot of different types of products that need to be diverted. So to just choose one, for example, is textiles. Many textiles are made of a wide variety of different materials. Some of those materials are organic, some are not. So it's very difficult to kind of identify that by just looking at a piece of clothing and figuring out what it's made out of and what's the appropriate technology to process it. You know, in California, we have extended producer responsibility legislation like SB 707 to require textile manufacturers to ensure textiles are recyclable, but that's also just one product type. We need similar legislation and actual follow-through with industry making those changes to ensure that each material is easily diverted. But I don't know if anyone had anything to add to that.
Yeah, I would just say that specifically in Pennsylvania, there's a lot of discussion around extended producer, but not a whole lot of movement in our area. So I think it's definitely something we're interested in. We're interested in seeing if more can be developed. But at this point, it's pretty limited and relatively new in the discussion portion of it.
Yeah, I can't speak to California or Pennsylvania specifically, but certainly on a national level and even on an international level, a lot of talk about extended producer responsibility. It's the right idea, and there are a lot of people at the table. Unfortunately, not all those people have the same motives. The system is not up and running and functional yet. Someday maybe it'll get there, but we're certainly heading in the right direction. The question, I think, really is going to be the administration of it at the end of the day. Where does the money get spent? And is everybody that is part of the process, being fairly compensated or treated? And I think, one of the things right now that I think is a big issue with the haulers is that most of the burden is being placed on them, but they're not actually being compensated at all. So you have that, and they're not complaining really. I mean, you only hear it, side remarks, but they're a big part of this, and where are they in this all? So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done.
And from a SWANA perspective, we have a technical policy that focuses on EPR that came out in October of last year. And that collaboration is a key part of that. You can't have packaging manufacturers go off and say, well, I've designed this new packaging that meets all of these requirements, and here, figure out how to deal with it. You've got to have those conversations so that the full spectrum of the life cycle can be seen and discussed, and looking at it from a perspective of how does it integrate into systems that we have. Developing a new piece of packaging is great, but if there's not a process or a technology in place to deal with the end of life of that product, then you've made something that looks really cool, but we can't do anything with it.
A little bit more of a comment, but I just want to encourage all of you folks up there, to also think about non-traditional allies, for your industry to be partners with. For example, Baker Commodities is part of the rendering industry, which is, known as the original recyclers, and, we've been around since 1937 doing what we do, and so, not just our company, but the industry in general. And, oftentimes we get kind of overlooked, in the public works perspective and, in the waste haulers for sure, because we're regulated more usually on the USDA side and the agricultural side versus, we're not regulated by CalRecycle directly in California, for example, but there are others out there doing the right thing, converting, waste to energy and other products as well. And, we certainly would love to partner more with groups like yourselves and folks like yourselves to encourage everyone to do better for the environment. So I'd highly recommend, consider some non-traditional allies, out there. I mean, we would love to, partner more with you all as well.
That's an excellent segue for the question I was holding on to for the end. We did not plan that. But thanks for setting it up. So what I want to finish with today is what are the gaps and what are the challenges to getting to a place where conversion technologies are, something that is front and top of mind when thinking about waste management. So what are those, from each of your perspectives, which are all different, what are those challenges, those barriers, and how can groups like industry partners or SWANA or SWIX help fill those gaps and bridge those barriers?
Sure. I think it's the regulatory barriers in California, which then make development of conversion technologies not financially viable. So if organizations like SWANA could support these pilot projects demonstrating emissions reductions, could pursue legislative proposals to clear a pathway for these technologies, I think that would be helpful because, like we mentioned, sometimes each individual entity may not be able to create that change, but if we collaborate, we can hopefully get some momentum going.
I would agree with that, so certainly from a regulatory perspective. I think, you know, we're a country of entrepreneurs, but in this particular case, particularly in the waste industry, you know, that the entrepreneurs have a tough time because of regulation, because of cost, because of, well, the system is built this way and there's no room for this technology, or we've segmented the waste stream so much that, well, you only concentrate on this one thing, and we have all this other stuff that we need to be mindful of, or that gets priority over what you're doing. So I think, you know, being able to be in an environment was a little bit more friendly to experimentation and entrepreneurship, so that we could get, you know, so that we can develop through through pilot projects or demonstration projects and prove technologies to get them to commercial scale. You know, that would certainly be, you know, the sort of landscape that we would love to see, you know, going forward. I think it would do a lot for the future of the waste industry because there's some big challenges ahead.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what they mentioned. Maybe the only other piece I'll add is I do think there's room for public education in there as well. You can talk about regulations and regulators and trying to influence them, but a lot of that can come from very base level, just public outreach and public education as a whole. So 100% agree. I think it's the regulations and trying to streamline that process and influence that process really, but I think it also can look a little bit different in trying to educate the public and make sure they understand the big picture of what we're trying to do, whether it's from a system-wide perspective or an individual project perspective.
If I could just add one more thing, I think the other thing that I forgot to mention is, you know, there are a lot of really amazing technologies and incredible people that are building them that never see the light of day because they never get past bench scale or they never get past prototype. They can't get that final lift that they need to reach commercialization. And, you know, granted, you know, investors, you know, are looking at risk. They're doing a risk assessment. Nobody wants to go first, and somebody has to. So if there was an environment in which there could be more experimentation to prove some of those technologies, I think what we would find is that there are a lot of really great things out there that have been, you know, really held down because of the lack of financing, and rightfully so. I mean, as an investor, you have all of these opportunities and you only have so much money to work with. You're gonna focus that money in areas where there is less risk. That makes sense. But how do you create an environment where we could be a little bit riskier so that we could, you know, potentially develop some of these new technologies?
So again, that regulatory crystal ball, whoever's holding on to it, seems like it'll solve all of our problems. Nick, John, Kawsar, thank you so much for joining us today. Always great to learn something new, and I certainly did today from you all, so thank you.
And we will conclude. Reception is next door. You know, one of the, I guess,